For all of the great things that Halo 2 managed to achieve, a largely expanded story, more robust combat and gameplay systems, the rapidly expanding interest in online games on console, and the evolution of a series that had become a household name, with imagery of Master Chief becoming as synonymous with gaming as icons like Sonic, Mario and Crash, and Halo firmly cementing itself as the Xbox game. In spite of all the many things Halo 2 and by extension developer Bungie had managed, the reality of that game is that it was still a rushed product put together in a cave with a box of scraps. Such a short development time that overwhelmingly relied on tremendous crunch and frankly miserable working conditions had meant that some aspects of Halo 2 had to be left on the cutting room floor. Cut levels, a new flood enemy type that was cut from the game, even a Warthog run reminiscent of the first game was originally planned before being cut. Perhaps the most glaring thing that Bungie had to remove from the game very late into development was the entire second half of the game. The reason why Halo 2 suddenly ends after Tartarus' defeat and features cliffhangers of the Arbiter teaming up with Johnson while Chief returns to Earth to famously finish the fight is because they simply ran out of time to do the rest of the game. This meant that Halo 3 was pretty heavily planned out and scripted, with a lot of the ideas ready to be fleshed out over a year before development had even begun, aided by the power of the newly released Xbox 360, with higher graphical fidelity, greater interactivity with environments, and, actual time to work on the game at a more healthy pace, and to be able to work on and implement feedback from the second game. 2007's release of Halo 3 was pretty inarguably the biggest ever release of a video game that the world had ever seen, with Bill Gates himself for some reason selling the first ever copy of the game. The marketing behind this game was enormous and monumental, focusing instead on creative artistic representations of war and fake in-universe propaganda. It's a sheer display of just pure confidence that Bungie and Microsoft knew that this game was going to be a slam dunk, and basically just chose to market it by creating wonderful artwork rather than talking about the game very much at all. Perhaps the greatest benefit that the marketing had was that realistically Halo 3 had marketed itself. After the abrupt ending of Halo 2, pretty much everybody was ready to finish the fight.
We must go. The brutes have our scent.
Then they must love the smell of hero.
The game opens with a monologue from beloved AI companion Cortana, over top of some footage of what appears to be a meteor crashing down onto Earth. As it descends, it seemingly splits into two, this being the Forerunner ship from High Charity that Chief was on during his iconic finish the fight moment at the end of the last game. You may recall that he was aboard the ship last we saw of him, but it seems this other meteorite that comes right towards the screen is Chief being ejected from the ship and careening down to the Earth's surface. The events of what actually transpire between Halo 2 and 3 is covered in a graphic novel, and I won't go into it too much, but basically Chief was unsuccessful in any attempts at stopping Truth, as the Prophet made a few pit stops on his way to Earth. Just enough time for it to make sense that Johnson has somehow made it down to Earth far ahead enough of Chief so as to be the one to find him and attempt to wake him up. After checking vitals, he determines that the best they can do is just call for an evacuation to get what they logically assume to be the corpse of Master Chief out of here, moments before Master Chief obviously wakes up. Some tech nerd comes in to calibrate Chief's armor, which is where the tutorial would normally be if I wasn't playing on heroic difficulty because I'm so cool. Which, yes, as with the two prior games, I am once again playing on Halo the Master Chief Collection on Steam and on the heroic difficulty. That aside, Chief's calibration is interrupted by the sudden arrival of a stealthy elite encroaching, as his fight or flight seemingly kicks in and he puts the classic looking pistol up to the elite, who is revealed to be the Arbiter, or at least his chin. And this is where the first level will open up from, but we'll discuss that in the next chapter, alongside the other levels set on Earth. And I'll just sort of mention something disappointing. Arbiter's role in this game is no longer that of a playable protagonist, with him being relegated solely to being an AI-controlled partner with invincibility and an unlimited ammo energy sword that makes him pretty viable and helps overall lower the difficulty of the game compared to the former titles. Again, we'll discuss balance and difficulty later more in depth though, but in cooperative, Arbiter is the designated player too. No longer are there two Master Chiefs running amok, as for every single level, Chief will be accompanied in co-op by Arbiter, even in the levels where Arbiter isn't typically present. The game also has 4-player co-op with these other elites who aren't really worth talking about. The main thing is that, for now, Chief is reunited with both Arbiter and Johnson, and the three of them are now on Earth and ready to begin the finishing of the fight.
To war.
Setting off into the jungles of Africa and taking a brief moment to impress Hideo Kojima, the real game begins with the level Sierra 117, Chief's call sign, as Johnson separates from Arbiter and Chief as they have their first run-in with the Covenant, who are now led by the Brutes in place of the Elites. We get to play with a few weapons here, namely the return of the iconic assault rifle, and a more combat-evolved looking Magnum, even if it still pales in comparison. There's a few waves of grunts and such to be dealt with dropping from Phantoms, and we can use their weapons or even take the Brute shot very early, which I personally definitely do to replace the lackluster Magnum. Arbiter requests we stealth the next section before opening fire, which, thank you, and we get to see a new feature play out as an enemy drops some sort of spherical shield on the ground. Deployable equipment is a pretty major gameplay change Halo 3 features, and while I'll discuss it more so in the gameplay sections of course, it is worth noting that being able to deploy things like cover, grav lifts, regeneration pods, or these bubble shields is a huge shift to the gameplay and allows for a lot of creativity in your approach, while also adding some variety to enemies when brutes can drop something unexpected on you. We get to try out another brute weapon, as well as give the needler a go, reunite with the beloved battle rifle and venture forth through a cave, so we... Okay, I guess I need to rant very briefly. So, Cortana is still aboard High Charity as she was last we saw in Halo 2, surrounded by Flood a galaxy away and no doubt missing Chief, who has these sort of apparitions of Cortana speaking to him that slow the player to an absolute crawl. Pretty much every level has at least one of these, with one level in particular having a good dozen or so moments where Control is wretched away from the player to listen to Cortana yapping about her isolation. Obviously the player wants to rescue Cortana, she's been here since the beginning of the first game, and was an integral character to both that game and Halo 2's overarching stories. By this point the player probably likes Cortana and wants to see her, and by extension Chief, happy. But I also like to move forwards when I press the forwards button, so I think it's worth noting that this is a mild inconvenience overall. Oh, also Johnson's Pelican crashes, he's fine, but we do have to push through some mercifully nerfed sniper jackals to reach his location, where he runs off to evade the pursuing Covenant forces just as our dynamic duo arrive on scene. This little sandbox is the perfect place to give a few different weapons a go throughout the first level, and I'd say its weapon variety, giving options like the Covenant carbine, the beam rifle, or even the actual just full-on sniper rifle, make for a lot of unique gameplay options right away, and it's perhaps for the best that you get to play with a lot, because this is realistically one of the more difficult opening levels in a Halo game. Cover is quite limited, and you're pretty immediately introduced to enemies like the brutes and the sniper jackals that even on heroic can be pretty tough for the average person, let alone what they can do on legendary. Now this game is definitely easier than the previous games, I'd argue the easiest with Bungie's repertoire with Halo entirely, but this level in particular is a pretty brutal starting point as it doesn't even really attempt to ease the player into the game, just throwing them into it and telling them to have fun. Fortunately that's not too hard to do, as even some moderate difficulty won't stop me from blasting fools away with the Covenant carbine and reaching a ledge overlooking a dam, where we spy Johnson being captured by a brute chieftain and put into a makeshift jail of sorts. The sniper we borrowed from his Pelican is more than adequate a tool of picking off a few of these brutes and of course the sniper jackals, before jumping in and watching Arbiter blow himself up. As I said, invincible, so he'll get back up eventually, but also very clearly a silly AI. I get to use the grav hammer to kill the stragglers, rescue Johnson, and hold the line with him against incoming phantoms and the Covenant there within, as we wait for a Pelican rescue to come in and take us both to safety, and the next level, Crow's Nest. The level opens with Chief, Arbiter and Johnson all arriving safely at a secret underground World War II bunker a fair distance outside of New Mombasa and rendezvousing with Miranda Keyes. The crew gets an update on the war from the horrifying visage of Xbox 360 graphics Lord Hood. The war's going bad, before the power cuts out and truth takes over the screens to taunt and prepare for the invasion of this bunker. Miranda prepares the evacuation protocols, setting the coordinates for where her people should meet as to war, which is not a location but go off Queen, and thus the gameplay of this level commences as Chief effectively runs around performing errands for Miranda and or Johnson to aid in the evacuation efforts. Chief, go to the hangar and help the Marines. Chief, come back to the control center and help the Marines. Chief, go to the barracks and help the Marines. Chief, go help Arbiter evacuate some Marines. All of this culminating in a big bomb that Johnson hooked up being set to blow, after Chief has to rearm it of course, and the mad dash that Chief has to make down into the bunkers underneath the bunker before setting off on his next grand adventure on the road to a nearby town called Voi. Crow's Nest isn't all that bad of a level, and it is our first introduction to the Halo 3 versions of drones and the vastly improved versions of turrets, which can now be used as portable heavy weapons, as well as giving us a great variety of those fun deployable toys to play with and the brute's special spike grenades. We get some fun toys, but the level is a bit of a labyrinthine and poorly lit exercise in just running around and doing stuff. Unlike Savo Highway, which is about as quintessentially Halo a level there ever was. You hop into a warthog right near the beginning, and you drive until the game makes it abundantly clear you can drive no more. The driving controls are mostly the same as Halo 2, though perhaps they're a little bit more rolly. Things are certainly quite slippery, though the lumpy terrain of this level admittedly may not aid much in controlling a vehicle precisely. We of course get some fun new toys to play with too, such as the Brute Chopper, which is this cool motorbike-esque vehicle which apparently chops through enemy vehicles by ramming into them, as well as returning classics like the Sniper Rifle and Fuel Rod. It's also the best opportunity to showcase the newest and bestest feature the Plasma Pistol has available, taking it from being already arguably the best weapon in the game and an absolute crutch tool for Legendary into an unstoppable powerhouse that can even ruin people's equals fun in multiplayer. A charged plasma pistol shot no longer exclusively strips the shields of an enemy hit, but also disables any and all vehicles hit by it as well. Just a single plasma pistol shot and you can go and hijack yourself a Wraith and turn the rest of the level into a cakewalk, an option I very much choose to exploit. As we approach the town of Voi, we can overlook the Prophet of Truth ship from High Charity in the middle of a large excavation site. It seems, like Regret before him, that Truth has a great interest in Kenya for whatever reason, and has been searching for something in this area, something that humanity would like very much him not to have.
This is the way the world ends.
Having arrived at Voi, Chief heads through with a contingent of Marines to take out the aerial defences the Covenant have set up in the area. Lord Hood is planning to approach Truth's little archaeological project with a fleet of ships to, frankly, blow it up. But the anti-aircraft weapon in the area is likely to ruin those plans. As such, Chief goes in quickly and begins blowing up the upsettingly unhijackable AA Wraiths with a small force of Warthogs. I of course make sure to follow in keeping with Halo tradition and drive a hijacked Ghost into an area that nobody has any rightful reason driving any manner of vehicle into, and get a pretty sick action moment of killing a guy, getting out of my Ghost and taking his plasma turret for my own use. Feeling overconfident in myself now after doing something so cool, I proceeded to do nothing particularly exciting for the remainder of the mission, and even very likely led to my own demise a number of times because I was now trying to do cool stuff. We mount up on a little quad bike called a Mongoose with a rocket launcher strapped Marine on our back, and somehow miss both AA Wraiths in the area being destroyed by the other Marines off screen. Shortly thereafter, the earth trembles and a new and improved Scarab comes over the top of the buildings into this little arena of ours. Now I may have just said new and improved, but the reality is that this thing is kind of underwhelming compared to the Halo 2 Scarab, which was effectively the entire set piece that 2 whole levels revolved around. These guys are essentially just throwaway and repeatable boss encounters that show up from time to time and can be destroyed in a surprisingly large number of ways thanks to some glaring design oversights from the Covenant. Of course, these oversights are for gameplay purposes, but between an exposed core and highly destructible legs, it makes the Scarab impressive on the first playthrough, maybe even the first few playthroughs, but a bit of a joke for more experienced players. As such, I decided to take the funniest approach to dealing with this Scarab and go for the lifts that people probably don't even know were here, so that I can drop atop the Scarab and, I said drop atop the Scarab and take it out from the inside and watch it blow up from a distance I assumed to be safe. Whoops. Somehow a singular grunt survived this, and the level could not progress until he was dead, so after hunting him down and proceeding to the next area, we get to encounter hunters for surprisingly the first time, I do believe. Fortunately I held onto a rocket launcher from earlier, so they disappear quite swiftly, and Chief, now reunited with Arbiter, heads forwards and shuts down the AA gun, allowing for Lord Hood's bombing run to commence and finally ending the war with the Covenant.
This is the way the world ends.
Okay, so I was wrong. There's now a big portal open above the earth now, and the Covenant forces are all leaving, and goody goody the Flood have shown up. Chief and Arbiter fight their way in what is for some reason a different level to the previous one, across most of the areas the previous level had us fighting in, but this time the Flood's there. And I would say that this time the Flood are certainly a more formidable foe, with much stronger forms of them being present, and even getting to witness firsthand the more or less immediate infection of a live Marine into a Flood in a matter of seconds. We get to play with a shotgun and even the energy sword after Shipmaster makes his grand return and rescues the dynamic duo from the Flood, with Chief being given intel that Cortana is allegedly aboard the Flood-infested ship. With newfound determination, this very much brief and somewhat underwhelming level of Halo ends with Chief delving into the belly of the beast and being chatted to by not just Cortana, but now also Gravemind whispering sweet nothings at him. Chief finds a heavily damaged piece of machinery bearing a warning message from Cortana. It is too damaged currently, but fortunately Chief's best friend 343 Guilty Spark shows up to repair it. Naturally, there is not a lot of trust between the two of them, with their last encounter having ended with Guilty Spark trying to kill Chief and Cortana, and then the vice versa of now happening shortly thereafter as Guilty Spark's Halo ring was destroyed. In spite of this, with the absence of Halsey as of present, Guilty Spark is the only one capable of repairing what turns out to just be a pre-recorded Princess Leia style message for Chief. A message about a way to destroy the Flood without activating the Halo rings, by heading through the portal that Truth has just opened. Lord Hood is apprehensive about this, believing the best chances that humanity has, with the Flood now being on Earth, are to stand their ground and fight the Flood with everything they've got, to hold Earth or die trying. The elites, on the other hand, are very much ready and excited to go through the portal and kill Truth. Miranda agrees, and Chief trusts in Cortana's plan enough that the decision is made. Hood will stay and protect Earth with humanity, while Shipmaster will lead Chief, Arbiter, Miranda, Johnson and even Guilty Spark, with a large army of the joint forces of Earth and Sanghelios, into the portal. They swap weapons, they swap intel, and they all prepare to take the fight not only to the Flood to save humanity, but to stop Truth once and for all, as they approach the real endgame of this war. The Ark. The leap in console technology between the Xbox and the Xbox 360 was pretty substantial. Not only did games go from low poly graphics to muddy browns aiming at realism, but differences in physics and computational power allowed for much more energetic, high-octane and unique gameplay experiences across the board. This also applies to the PlayStation 3 of course, it's just not really relevant to Halo. And this allowed once again for the gameplay of Halo to evolve in ways that led to the most gameplay diverse Halo game in the series at the time of its release. Once more, let's quickly run through all the weapons, vehicles, and brand new this time around, deployable equipment thingies. The Magnum is back to its former appearance from Halo Combat Evolved, and the weapon is certainly much better than the pitiful pea shooter Halo 2 cursed its player base with. But I do still feel as though dual wielding neutered this weapon into a pale imitation of an actually fun pistol, into being something that is there to throw away as soon as you find a weapon with any actual meat to its bones. It's fine, but it really sits on the side of disposable weapons, alongside the assault rifle, Halo's iconic gun making its grand return after uncomfortably sitting out for Halo 2. Its ammo capacity is greatly lowered from the first game, but other than that it's still a pretty perfect option for a gun that spews bullets in the general direction of your baddies and deals a decent amount of damage for a weapon that you generally want to replace. Both it and the Magnum are perfectly fine weapons, and they are icons of the series. They're just nothing special in the grand scheme of things, and their damage output is low, with no real combo potential like they had in Combat Evolved. The SMG returns from Halo 2 as well, and is still also able to be dual wielded, basically serving as a lightweight alternative to the assault rifle, with larger magazines and considerably worse accuracy. Especially when holding two of them, these bad boys can spray down a lot of bullets into a corridor, but the odds of you realistically killing anyone gets a lot lower. A very suppressive fire type of weapon that, while fun to use, is only marginally better than the other two weapons we've spoken about so far. Unlike the battle rifle, who once again reigns supreme as the ultimate Halo weapon, with its signature 3-round burst, scope and absurdly high damage output. My main gripe with a lot of the other weapons largely boiled down to simply being outclassed by the battle rifle, which I suppose is more of an inherent problem with how universally powerful the battle rifle itself is, rather than a reflection on those guns. It does everything, it does it well, and it's fun to use in the process. Unlike the shotgun, which is more of a specialist tool, perhaps even more so than in any other Halo game, because I personally found that it felt pretty useless outside of more or less melee range, sputtering out a volley of low damage scraps that feel and sound punchier than they actually are. It's still an absolute monster in the right scenarios, especially still against the Flood, but it does feel like the automatic weapons sometimes are honestly better than the shotgun at closer ranges, or at least more consistent. And then we have the power weapons for humanity, the sniper rifle and the rocket launcher, also returning and fulfilling exactly the niches you might expect. The sniper rifle has a long-range scope of multiple tiers, and the rocket launcher makes things cease to be. They're rarer than the majority of UNSC weapons, but when you find them, they're pretty much always fun to use. While all of these guns return, at least in design from previous Halo games, Halo 3 does also provide one more brand new UNSC toy to play with in the form of the Spartan laser. Simply hold down the trigger for a short while and watch everything in a straight line get blasted with, well, laser. It fits into a similar slot as the rocket launcher as being pretty dang effective at dealing with pesky vehicles, hunters or powerful brutes, but it is a lot less forgiving in its aim and runs on a charge system that isn't able to be restocked in ammo in any way. And like Halo 2, the Covenant once again have a much greater variety of weapons, and while the brute plasma rifle was unable to return, a fact that I imagine nobody is too bothered by, the regular plasma rifle once again returns and is once again rather underwhelming, as it generally sprays down a lukewarm barrage of plasma shots that do middling damage in between overheats. It's fine, but it once again pales in comparison to even the human automatic weapons, with its only benefit over the assault rifle being its ability to be dual wielded, something that the SMG can do anyway. Fortunately, the plasma rifle's little brother is once again here to demonstrate why anyone and everyone should be carrying a plasma pistol at all times, with the dual purpose of not only shredding shields to set up for deadly combos, but also being able to completely disable a vehicle for a short period of time. The plasma pistol continues to be a weapon that instills fear in the hearts of any who face it, provided you hold the button down. And of course the Needler is back, and it's fine, it can no longer be dual wielded and therefore is back to being actually capable of outputting a pretty formidable threat when fired at enemies. But the time to kill is still hindered by and reliant entirely on the gimmick of filling an enemy with enough needles until the needles explode, which makes it ultimately a weapon that is realistically more fun than it is for any practical purpose. My beloved carbine, on the other hand, is once again the weird purple cousin of the battle rifle by proxy of being an accurate, deadly, scoped weapon that is fit for almost any purpose you could want. I have little more to say on it, as it's a perfect tool that is always there to help you when you need it, especially because a fair few enemies carry it with them for you to take advantage of after you deal with them. Similarly, the beam rifle is also back and once again fills the niche of essentially just being a slightly weirder sniper rifle equivalent for the Covenant to use, which is a category in which it is accompanied by the fuel rod filling in for the rocket launcher. I like both weapons, and there is always something neat about using the weird alien alternative to Halo's iconic weaponry, but there's nothing too exciting to say about weapons that boil down to a purple sniper rifle you can't reload and an orange rocket launcher with a few more shots in it. And of course the energy sword had to return after teasing us in the first game and amazing us in the second, and while its ability to send you flying through the sky like a majestic bird is more or less absent or certainly toned down from the weapon, with a far less generous lunge and a lot of bug fixes between the games, the weapon still pretty much instantly kills anything foolish enough to get close to you and still makes you feel pretty awesome every time you do so. The final returning Covenant gun is of course the Brute Shot, a weapon that you might have even forgotten was in Halo 2 to begin with, and a weapon that is still visually a lot more exciting than I feel its gameplay is. Don't get me wrong, I love the Junkrat-esque vibes of spamming grenades towards enemies and hoping they die, and smacking somebody with the gun is very satisfying in the animation department with increased damage to boot, but I feel spamming grenades towards enemies is just often less effective than the battle rifle and carbine. And again, this issue may just be exacerbated by the overall dominant status of those weapons, and the fact that the Brute Shot is simply outclassed in the explosives department by the rocket launcher and fuel rod, but the gun is really only something I pick up to shoot for a bit of fun before I move on to bigger and better things. However, the Brutes now being the primary antagonistic force of the game in place of the elites does allow for them to bring a few more weapons to their now expanded arsenal of guns, with weapons visually akin to that of the Brute Shot now appearing for you to use in Halo 3. The Mauler and the Spiker are two dual-wieldable weapons that appear from time to time, with the former being a sort of one-handed powerful shotgun type weapon, and the latter being like a needler that neither homes in on people nor explodes. The Mauler is highly effective at very close range, while the Spiker spews out enough of its namesake spikes to hold down an area and destroy anything in sight. I find the two of them to both be very effective and fun weapons, and when not being dual wielded they, as with the Brute Shot, deal extra melee damage. And as stated earlier, the Brutes also decided to bring their special little gravity hammer for our use, no doubt heavily inspired by the signature weapon of Tartarus in Halo 2. And this thing is probably my favourite weapon in any Halo game ever, dealing an absurd amount of damage in melee range and knocking back anyone unfortunate enough to be in a radius around you, yourself included. And our final weapon that can be wielded in actual first-person view is the Sentinel Beam, a weapon that many people probably forgot was actually even present in the game because it only shows up in a handful of levels. It's still effective against the Flood and it's still really satisfying to use when you do find it, but you probably won't end up using it unless your guns with longer range or more damage are out of ammo. Grenades of course also return, with the returning UNSC frag grenades and the sticky Covenant plasma grenades, which blow stuff up either from the floor or from an enemy's chest. But there are also the Brute's signature spike grenades, which detonate into a bunch of bouncing spikes that deal damage at a slightly better range than other grenades and can really spread the damage around chaotically while still being able to stick onto an enemy. And then there's the incendiary grenades, which are incendiary, great against the Flood, but like the Sentinel Beam they rarely show up at all. And yet we still have more weapons to go, as we now have the third person turret type weapons that Chief carries underarm, with which you can rain fire upon your foes, sometimes literally. The machine gun is your standard turret, which in its turret form has infinite ammo and gives a small shield, but when removed is, I think, the fastest fire rate weapon in the game, which does some pretty absurd damage to make up for how pitiful your movement speed and lack of melee options are. The plasma cannon therefore is the Covenant equivalent of this, and like most plasma weapons is more effective against shields, but is otherwise not noteworthy because it is the machine gun in a stunning desert azure colour. The missile pod is a mortar cannon on the stand, and a pretty fast-firing guided missile launcher when carried around, and while it barely shows up in the campaign, it's a devastating little tool that will almost always kill what you want it to. And finally, the flamethrower finally returns from Halo Combat Evolved and is the ultimate in flood destroying tools, with it perhaps being even more scarce than the missile pod and only really effective at close range. But as a Gravhammer fan, I would consider myself particularly fond of being in enemies' faces, and thus I do approve. Normally I would move on from the weapons to do the vehicles next, but since Halo 3 introduces the equipment, let's quickly rattle through those bad boys, starting with the Bubble Shield, the one that appeared in the trailers for Halo 3 as a big selling point and is a spherical shield that blocks bullets, but has a little projection device inside that, when destroyed, destroys the shield as well. The Trip Mine is a landmine that you can put down that blows up when something stands on it or drives over it. The deployable cover is similar to the shields that the Covenant even had set up all over the Halo ring in the first game, but in a more portable and convenient form factor. The flare is obnoxious and makes everything a bright white and I hate it, and the gravity lift lifts you up into the air for some pretty fun movement options that counter Halo's more simple movement, giving you a lot of freedom to get places quicker. The power drain is essentially a ball you throw out that provides the effects of the charged plasma pistol shot in an area, draining shields and disabling vehicles, and over time even killing someone if they keep standing near it. While the regenerator is basically the opposite, providing large bursts of healing over a short period of time to keep anyone stood within its range alive for a long time. I forgot to actually pick up and use the radar jammer to provide an example, but it does more or less exactly what you'd expect and jams the radar of anybody in its range, something I think works nicely in tandem with the cloaking device, which makes you invisible. The auto turret deploys a little friend that deals some damage to enemies it faces, and the final power-up is a pretty rare one called invincibility, which makes you The latter three, cloaking, auto turret and invincibility, are unavailable in multiplayer, but all the others can be found in the campaign and online, and they all provide a lot of unique options and variety to more or less any combat situation, spicing up the gameplay from previous installments in potentially a lot of fun ways. I am particularly fond of the grav lift and the regenerator myself, and with enough people you could even combo different items together to make some really stupid strategies. In terms of vehicles, I feel there isn't all that much left to say about the Warthog, Ghost, Banshee or even the Wraith, as they function pretty much identically to how they did in Halo 2, and aren't really worth focusing on too much. The Warthog is a car with a turret or Gauss cannon in the back, or the brand new variant with no weapon in the back if you're that way inclined, and feels great to drive, while the Ghost is a smaller vehicle that gives the pilot autonomy to fire their own dang weapon, and the Banshee is basically just a flying ghost with a bomb and fancy flips. While the Wraith is a big ghost that fires arcing projectiles, there is a new anti-aircraft version of the Wraith that fires essentially just fuel rod shots, but is unable to be piloted by the player, so not much more really needs to be said. Now, I specifically didn't lump the Scorpion in with all the returning vehicles, because in spite of it once again returning, the Scorpion is slightly, and I do mean slightly, different. The driver only controls the vehicle and the main cannon, and a second person is needed to man the turret atop the vehicle. I did say it was only a slight difference, there's only so much they can do to a tank to differentiate it from other tanks, and it still destroys pretty much anything you point it at. Our first new vehicle is the Mongoose, which I believe was cut from Halo 2 later into development before making its way into Halo 3 as a small little and highly manoeuvrable quad bike that, while it has no weapons of its own, can seat a second person wielding any handheld weapon they want to assist the driver. It's a fun little guy, even if it does have a pretty high chance of rolling around after the slightest uneven terrain gets in the way. And the final UNSC vehicle is the Hornet. It's a helicopter type, drone type thing. I'm sure there's some sort of real life equivalent to this that I am uninformed about, but it functions like an easy to control helicopter with both machine guns and rockets that the pilot can use. Unlike the Banshee, it doesn't constantly move forwards, making it very easy to shoot stuff with, while also generally having the caveat of being a lot easier to be shot at. Halo 2 featured a vehicle nobody cared about called the Spectre, and Halo 3 features a brute vehicle called the Prowler that is honestly pretty much the same thing, as the Covenant's equivalent to the Warthog with a turret on the back and space for some friends. It's pretty quick, but with no boost or anything, it's still one of the slower Covenant vehicles, and with no ability to fire weapons as the driver, there's only so much fun you can really have with it. Unlike the brute's other vehicle, the Chopper, which both lets the driver shoot its explosive rounds, and has a boost, pitiful as it may be, which allows you to absolutely mangle opposing vehicles. The Chopper is visually great and sounds great on paper, until you realise that controlling this thing is a little bit of a nightmare, as it's this weird hovering front wheel drive motorbike thing with its main point of rotation on a weird axis that causes you to flip out at the slightest inconvenience. An A for effort on the Chopper, but sometimes the Ghost is just a lot less stress inducing. Now, I did say that the Hornet was the final UNSC vehicle, and in the campaign that is true, but I would be remiss to not give a shout out to my boy the Elephant from the multiplayer, which is effectively a large chunk of level that the player is given the autonomy to drive around at their leisure, with the potential for mini battles to take place atop the vehicle due to just how big it is. Don't get me wrong, it's slow, but it's a really fun and unique idea for a vehicle with a lot of gameplay practicality, and I will give a brief shout out to the returning non-drivable dropships in the Pelican and the Phantom. Love these guys, but they are a footnote, as outside of a few missions where you can destroy Phantoms, they're more set dressing than they are vehicles. And so that's it for the variety of weapons, equipment and vehicles in Halo. For the sake of splitting things up, I shall make the enemies into their own shorter chapter and footnote this one with a brief mention of other gameplay mechanic staples in Halo. Staples such as the inability to sprint, the omnipresent radar that lets you see the approximate locations of enemies, most weapons being ineligible to aim down the sights, and of course the fact that Chief just jumps kinda high in the air. Halo 3 doesn't do a whole lot to evolve on the staples of Halo that had been established in the first two games. It takes what worked, gives you more toys to play with, and removing only a few small toys in the Brute Plasma Rifle, the Blue Sentinel Beam and the Spectre, most of which were replaced with more interesting variants anyway, and lets you loose into its levels with plenty of brand new toys to play with and a large smorgasbord of tools at your disposal. I described Halo 2 as being combat refined, and as such I think Halo 3 should be given the title of combat perfected.
What is it? More brutes?
Worse.
Following that little civil war amongst the Covenant that Chief got all caught up in, the elites have officially split from the Covenant and have joined forces with humanity to mount a united effort in stopping the Prophet of Truth from launching his so-called Great Journey, something we by now know to be the activation of the Halo Rings to end all life across the galaxy, a plan born of ignorance, ego and overall stupidity, with the Covenant's cult-like religious doctrine leading to this plan getting dangerously close to being enacted twice already. What this means for the gameplay of Halo 3, however, is that the elites are no longer the main enemies of the game, as they are now strictly allies for the Master Chief and work alongside us. As such, the Brutes now have to step up to the plate as the primary antagonistic force of Halo 3, with the rest of the previous Covenant forces at their side. This does mean that yes, unlike the latter levels of Halo 2, we will have no allied grunts or hunters at any point in this game, with any appearances of these guys being strictly limited to the baddie side, and largely being unchanged for the most part. Grunts, for example, retain their status as your typical cannon fodder, low health, single headshot enemies. And Jackals are basically just the same thing, but with a shield you have to play around, typically by shooting their hands first. Both of these little guys tend to wield smaller weapons, plasma pistols and the like, but Grunts can on occasion wield fuel rods or run at you with plasma grenades to give you a big explosive hug, while Jackals sometimes wield carbines or beam rifles to try and pick you off from afar. Drones are effectively a similar situation to Grunts as well, but they fly and only ever show up in absolutely gigantic hordes that can really overwhelm you in a lot of situations. So while they are still a very fragile species of enemy, they are worthy of some respect and need to be dealt with pretty quickly when they show up. Normally I would now speak of the elites, but this time we can skip that and talk about the Brutes, who find themselves as a sort of hybrid of the elites and Brutes from Halo 2 this time around. Elites used to be similar to the Chief himself by having shields you had to strip away to open them up for a kill shot, while Brutes used to all be about armour with headshots that remove their helmets to open them up for easy kills, albeit with a final Brute in an encounter going berserk and rushing at you to attack with a flurry of blows. Your typical Brute in Halo 3 is much more similar to the Brutes of Halo 2, but toned down a bit to function better as a typical enemy, as opposed to being the dangerous endgame threat that they were previously. By not having to rely on plasma weaponry to strip their shields, it makes the game a lot easier than the older titles, but does come into an issue with higher ranked Brute enemies. Like the elites, who had a variety of colours to dictate approximately how difficult to fight each one was going to be, the Brutes come in a variety of different colours, but most importantly have a variety of fancy helmets that they can equip to show you how scared you should be, and some of the scarier helmets for Brutes indicate not only more powerful weaponry, but also shields that you have to play around. For the most part, I still stand by the stance that Brutes are considerably easier as a primary antagonistic force than the elites were, but this is aided in part by the generalist and very much hard to argue against fact that Halo 3 is categorically an easier game to play, even on legendary difficulty, than Halo 2 was. The Master Chief used to be the weakest entity in any given encounter, but is now able to survive a fair amount of turmoil and with a lot more leeway given to you than you had. For example, the Jackal snipers used to essentially be a knowledge check on the player. Either you react at light speed and shoot first before they could, requiring a frankly unfair amount of foresight for newer players to possibly deal with, or you die. But the Jackal snipers now not only sometimes wield carbines that are incapable of one-shotting, but even the beam rifle guys who could in theory still annihilate you have a much higher tendency to miss, with it being almost impossible for a Jackal sniper to headshot you on the first shot, typically firing at least one warning shot that goes near your head with a large tracer to tell you their location. Sure, you can still die instantly to fuel rods and gravity hammers, but overall, the Covenant are at their, in terms of gameplay, weakest they have ever been, and the game is largely a lot less stress-inducing on the heroic difficulty I recorded the gameplay on than the first two games. One notable exception to this are the Hunters, who ironically find themselves at probably the most difficult they have ever been to face, going from pushovers who died from a single pistol shot to these behemoths that take a lot of dipping and or diving or some extremely powerful weaponry to overcome. While I like how much more accessible that will make this game, it can of course make the game arguably too easy for Halo veterans without the use of modifiers from skulls. On the other hand, the Flood are probably the strongest they have ever been. All the old Flood types still return, with the infection forms latching onto you and the carrier forms creating large explosions, creating waves of the aforementioned infection forms. And the combat forms take on the forms of various species using their weapons and tactics to shoot at you with guns you are used to. But the brand new pure forms are a whole new issue for you to face, with the Stalker forms crawling all over the place, walls and ceiling included, before finding a place to stop and transform into something more practical, the range form or the tank form. These guys do more or less what you would probably expect for them to be doing. The range form latches onto any surface and fires an unending volley of shots at you from unexpected angles, which can honestly make them hard to deal with, as it can be very difficult to find them at times. While the tank forms, on the other hand, basically just rush you down and try to smack you, while themselves having a large amount of health. They don't show up as often as other Flood forms tend to, similar to the Hunters, typically do their best to demand some respect. In truth, I do find them to be not quite as tanky as you might expect from something called a tank, and I actually often find range forms to be much more powerful. Overall, the Flood are generally able to be taken down in a more versatile number of ways, with their uncharacteristic sturdiness when it comes to melee being heavily toned down. And with Flood enemies only really showing up in about 4 of the game's 10 playable stages, and only in like the last 5% of one of those stages, well, the enemy variety in Halo 3 is arguably toned down slightly on account of the absence of elites, but with the versatility of brutes being greatly expanded upon and the Flood becoming generally just a much more interesting type of enemy to face. I find the game still has a lot of fun and variety when it comes to its enemies, aided by what is by far the best weapon and vehicle count that a Halo game had thus far seen, and the addition of equipment to really change things up in the name of wackiness.
They outnumber us 3-1.
Then it is an even fight.
At the end of Halo 2, we were given a series of cliffhangers for potential plot hooks going into Halo 3. Chief returning to Earth to finish the fight is the most iconic of these, and is the one that the levels we have discussed thus far set on Earth pretty directly followed on from. But one that is perhaps the most interesting from a story perspective is the revelation that 343 guilty sparkled to Arbiter, Johnson and Miranda that Delta Halo had activated a remote detonation method from a mysterious facility known as the Ark, which is, if you recall, where Truth has headed from his portal opened on Earth, something I'll talk a bit more about in the next chapter, and is where he has been pursued by the United Human Sangheili forces, with pretty much every major character barring Lord Hood headed to the Ark as well. The Master Chief, the Arbiter, Sergeant Johnson, 343 Guilty Spark, Miranda Keyes and even Shipmaster are all here to take down the Covenant once and for all, and to stop the Prophet of Truth from remotely activating the Halo rings and killing all life in the galaxy, with the intended purpose of ending the Flood infection and the misinterpreted purpose for Truth to reach the Covenant equivalent of Nirvana. But where is here? Where is the Ark? Well, by looking up into the sky above, we can see that it is seemingly a gigantic Forerunner structure somewhere outside of the Milky Way galaxy itself, with the gang setting foot in the middle of a large desert somewhere supposedly nearby to the cartographer, which, if you cast your mind back to Combat Evolved, is the place that tells us where to find the control room, no doubt Truth's intended destination. Chief and a few ODST troops travel through the desert a short ways, but ultimately it is decided that they are absolutely no match for the Covenant forces, and, more importantly, the Forerunner technology blocking the way, and that they will need a larger contingent of allied forces to take the fight to the cartographer, and that they will need Guilty Spark, who is aboard Miranda's ship, the Forward Unto Dawn. A designated landing zone is selected, but with AA Wraith set up in the area, it once again falls upon Chief to clear it out, with the player getting to use a few fun toys along the way throughout this level thus far, ultimately culminating on one of the most breathtaking scenes in any Halo game in my personal opinion, as the Forward Unto Dawn rapidly flies in and sets down, blasting anything too close to it flying away from the sheer size and speed of this thing. A truly breathtaking, unforgettable moment is only made more amazing by Johnson's delivery of several Scorpions for us to play with. As one Marine so eloquently puts it, tank beats everything. Hunters, Wraiths, even the mighty Phantom all fall before the might of our tank as we return to the large structure with Guilty Spark in tow, open up the doors and continue through with our small army. I play with the Gaussog for a bit and determine that I do in fact still love this weapon, but decide when the Scarab gets involved that it's perhaps wiser to get back into the Scorpion and shoot at its legs to allow me to hop aboard and destroy it. With that one out the way, Chief reunites with the Arbiter, fighting their way to get through the structure until finding the map that tells Guilty Spark, and by extension our heroes, exactly where to find Truth. Unfortunately, their moment of triumph is rudely impeded upon as the brutes once again begin to attack, with Chief getting stuck behind as everyone else escapes, being forced to make his way downstairs to be picked up again. Downstairs this though, he is met by a brute chieftain who challenges him to a one-on-one combat, mano a mano, except not that actually, as that means hand to hand, but the rest of the brutes do happily sit back and enjoy the show as their chosen champion attempts to take the chief down single-handedly. After he gets absolutely destroyed however, the brutes' real honour is displayed once again as the rest of them take no time at all jumping, quite literally, into action and trying to unjustly kill the victor of a fair duel, even calling in some jackals for backup. Not having any of their nonsense however, Chief, and by extension myself, quickly deal with them and escape from the cartographer in Johnson's Pelican to find truth and bring an end to the Covenant once and for all, in a level aptly named The Covenant, where Chief touches down on a beach and is once again tasked with Halo 3's favourite objective of taking down the local anti-aircraft guns and being rewarded with a vehicle dropped off for us. Unlike the last level however, this time we are only given but a bog standard Warthog, though nonetheless it is an adequate tool for advancing up the hill and taking out the Covenant forces at the base of a large tower. I suppose I should probably explain that these towers are 3 big defensive structures that maintain a force field around the Prophet of Truth's current location, a place known as the Citadel, which is one of several places where one can activate the Ark's remote detonation of the entire Halo array, yada yada. Each tower contains a small force of baddies to contend with, a lift upon which to elevate, and then a big baddie brute bulwark boldly buffering, broaching bids, bumping buttons, protecting Truth's force field. In spite of this, they can't protect much once they've been defeated in combat, and both Chief and Arbiter successfully disable their assigned towers very quickly, leaving only the 3rd tower unfinished, the one assigned to Johnson. Johnson has not had a good go of things in this game thus far, being kidnapped by the brutes and largely sidelined as Chief's BFF by Arbiter, and now he's managed to get himself kidnapped by the brutes yet again after he had already spent half of Halo 2 also having been kidnapped by the brutes and spent most of Combat Evolved presumed dead by flood infection. Well, Chief to the rescue again as he gets to fly one of those aforementioned Hornets and shoot down a whole bunch of Banshees and Phantoms, doing a little drive-by on Arbiter's tower to reconvene with the elites and head on down to Johnson's tower to... no, let's never call it that again actually, that sounds perverse. Johnson's structure? To save the day past the horde of drones and another beguiling brute holding a big gun. The field is now down, the Flood show up on the Ark, and everyone is gathered around Truth's Citadel to take the fight to the Covenant's head honcho. Miranda and Shipmaster are up in the skies blasting down and commanding their forces, Arbiter is also in the air I think, and Chief is rolling in once more in a tank. And then the developers over at Bungie lost their minds and decided to give us 2 simultaneous Scarabs to fight. This is where I intended to show the ability to sort of just shoot from behind the Scarabs to destroy them, something I was pretty confident can be done, but I was unable to really get it to work. No doubt it's just a skill issue, or I'm just doing something wrong and being mistaken, but eventually after trying way too many times to try to get it to work, I just stopped to drop in on the Scarabs and do it like I did that first one we saw, but, you know, twice. With those guys dealt with, all units converge on the Prophet's location as Arbiter joins Chief for the final stretch, 2 brothers in arms, crossing the bridge laid before them by Guilty Spark, ready to deal with Truth and rescue Johnson. And then Miranda crashes her Pelican into the window, kills like a few brutes trying to have her action hero moment, and gets flatlined by Truth while Johnson suggests they Hunger Games one another. Okay, so I know I really skipped over that scene a bit, but I do just generally take issue with the idea that Miranda somehow felt her only course of action to try and delay Truth from using Johnson to activate the Ark, something Truth is incapable of doing as he is not human, is just absurd. I don't necessarily buy that Miranda truly couldn't do literally anything else to save the day, and that not only did she fly through the window, but then she got out of her spaceship to shoot people with a dinky little pistol is somehow the optimal choice for saving the day. Truth killing her is definitely upsetting, as Miranda has been here since the start of Halo 2, where she was set to continue the legacy of her father Jacob Keyes from the first game. And I appreciate that it's not unexpected to have one of Chief's friends die at some point during this massive and culminating battle. It really is more so just the way in which she dies that bothers me. Or not even that really, it's just the sequence of events that lead to her getting spiked in the back. I don't at all hate Truth killing her narratively, I just think flying through the window is uncharacteristically reckless of somebody who has thus far been portrayed as relatively tactical. And perhaps the worst part is that after shooting her, Truth just waddles on over without his chair just to slam Johnson's hand onto the console anyway, activating the firing sequence and getting all the rings ready to do their thing. Enter Arbiter and Chief. With the clock quite literally ticking down its final moments, they're faced with the daunting task of getting through the most elite force of Covenant Guardsmen protecting their final and most powerful prophet. But, and I know I didn't give the whole thing too much fanfare, the Flood have arrived on the Ark, with High Charity Park just around the corner and, therefore, Gravemind himself getting involved directly. Specifically, he offers a parley between the Flood and the human/elites, joining together just this once for a very, very brief moment to aid Chief and Arbiter on their way to kill Truth. And this is probably the most triumphant that any moment in any Halo game has ever felt, overcoming all the odds throughout this game and the prior two to get to this moment where you play as your two heroes in the final approach to the big bad evil guy, with the other antagonist even aiding you in this final moment. It may be triumphant, but it's not necessarily easy, as there's a good few fuel rods, brute shots and various grenades just going off trying to explode you, but with enough perseverance and a little help from your friendly Flood fellas, Chief and Arbiter eventually arrive before truth. By now he has been infected with the Flood, just as Mercy was, and he is dying believing he is on the cusp of the Great Journey. Gravemind attempts to speak through him, but Arbiter insists his revenge for what the Covenant have done is due for the Prophet and not the Plague, as Chief disables the Halo rings once and for all. And the Prophet of Truth is slain. The Great Journey is over, and the Covenant are defeated. Johnson takes Miranda's body to her still fully functioning Pelican and prepares to leave, when Gravemind once more turns against our heroes. The Sergeant barely manages to abscond the premises, but Gravemind ensures that the duo get to pose up like a pair of absolute kings, and the player is made to fight their way back across the same long path that led them to the Prophet, except this time they face the Flood. I would say that the return journey is considerably easier, if not just because the Flood present a typically easier foe to face than the Covenant tend to, and with the Sentinels still now aside for once, we make it to the end of this corridor and jump blindly into a hole where Chief sees what seems to be Cortana leading him to a control panel. Upon pressing the button, however, one final twist is revealed. A new Halo, built to replace the one that Chief and Cortana destroyed, a way to defeat the Flood by activating the ring and killing all life across the Ark to kill the Flood infection. Activating a ring, however, requires an index, and it just so happens Chief knows exactly where to find the index for this specific ring. Cortana.
A reclaimer? Here? At last!
Okay, I'm sure we're all excited to see Chief finally go ahead and finish the fight and whatnot, and I know Halo fans will be very eager to see how I try and twist any discussion of the next level into anything even remotely positive, because I assure you the next level is not an especially good one, unlike the last two. But before we get there, I have promised in both the Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 2 videos that I will, in the Halo 3 video, talk about what exactly the heck a Forerunner is, and why the Oracles have referred to Chief as a Reclaimer on more than one occasion. And to talk about this, we have to turn the clocks back, about 100,000 years or so, give or take, to a Milky Way galaxy that looked very different to the one Chief and Arbiter currently live in. I mean, the general geography and layout is the same, bunch of stars, planets orbiting a big black hole thing, or at least as such is my understanding of how galaxies work at a base level, but the inhabitants of the galaxy were greatly different. You see, back then the major players in the galaxy, the only guys we care about at least because we are ignoring Halo 5 and Halo Infinite, were the Forerunners, the Flood, and the humans. The Forerunners, as we know, built the Halo Rings and the Ark and Truth Ship and all this weird otherworldly architecture that we have seen throughout all three games thus far across the two Halo Rings and the Ark. All those harsh angles and light structures and such. At some point along the way, and trust me, the lore goes into a load of detail between all the terminals and books and comics and everything in between, with so much of the story as a whole across the franchise not being necessarily depicted or even attempted to be explained in the games. So trust me, when I say some point, it will be more defined somewhere, but with how much you'd have to study and with all the retcons and stuff along the way, I'll just stick to the vaguely defined some point, and say that at some point along the way, the Forerunners and the Flood are fighting one another, with the Flood intending to kill all life as they do. The Forerunners erected the Halo Rings for exactly the purpose we have thus far understood, as a final resort to destroy the Flood's food source of all organic life across the cosmos. In spite of this, the highly advanced Forerunners are pretty reluctant about doing this, and one particular Forerunner decides to allow for a method in which the humans should be allowed to themselves activate the Halo Rings. Her reasoning for this basically boiling down to the idea that she just really loved humanity. We were her little pookie bears and she cared greatly for our well-being, purity and generally good-natured exploits. Unlike the Forerunners, the humans were more agreeing and nice in general, and she believed that they were to inherit the mantle of responsibility once the Forerunners themselves were no more. For the most part though, not every Forerunner thought humanity was the bee's knees. But the failsafe was built so that, if it were ever necessary, only the Forerunners and the humans, and nobody else, would be able to push the button. And, as we know from what we were told by Guilty Spark and Penitent Tangent, push the button, they did. More or less all life across the galaxy was snubbed by the activation of the Halo Rings, Forerunner and human alike, as well as whatever else was out there, and eventually the Flood succumbed to starvation and dying out, saving the remnants of life across the galaxy. I mean, except for the Flood that were still alive separately on both the Halo Rings that we visited, and also there might be more out there as is implied in Halo Infinite, but besides that, the Flood were totally, completely eradicated, and were there any Forerunners or humans left to celebrate, they would be most pleased with this outcome. Over time, life returned to the galaxy and a new form of humanity, the one we know today, was born from the ashes of their forebearers. The Forerunners kinda just stayed dead, but humanity returned to the galaxy anew and repopulated planet Earth with no technology to speak of, as their former technologies and the technologies of the Forerunners had long been buried beneath the ground over years of erosion from when the people were all corpses. Hence the portal to the Ark being located by New Mombasa and by both Regret and Truth seemed to have such a vested interest in the planet, despite the former not even being aware that it was humanity's home world. The ancient humans, the Reclaimers, were gone. But their decision to ultimately activate the rings in the direst of situations ultimately led to the forming of the great misunderstanding that is the Covenant's entire basis of their religion, leading to the situation that was so narrowly avoided numerous times now by Chief's hands, the activation of the Halo rings. The Forerunners are an interesting topic, and while this shorthand explanation of them may seem rushed, it's because I'm of the general opinion that the mystery and intrigue of the Forerunners is oftentimes a lot more compelling narratively than the explanations that have been provided, so I'd just personally rather keep the information to a bit of a minimum and go over the key aspects of who exactly the Forerunners were and what they and the ancient humans got up to that led directly to the current situation, while also showing a few book recommendations on screen for places where you can do a bit of homework and find out your own research about the Forerunners and how they tie into it all. But with that, just as the ancient humans got to activate the Halo rings, seemingly, so too shall the modern humans, as Chief is setting off to go and find the Index to do it all over again.
Thought I'd try shooting my way out. Mix things up a little.
Cortana has the Index, Chief wants the Index. Gravemind has Cortana, Chief wants Cortana. With her being aboard the flood-infested husk that was once the bustling Covenant capital of High Charity, by this point it should be expected that Chief is more than willing to venture headfirst into the belly of the beast to save the galaxy, and he's yet to shy away from a little flood in the past. He quickly flies himself down to High Charity and hops aboard to begin the search for his true ride or die. Sorry, Arbiter. This level, aptly named Cortana, after the woman we are indeed rescuing, is, terrible. I don't like it one bit, actually. If you cast your mind back to the issues that plagued the library and Combat Evolved, you'll find a lot of similar problems this time around, sadly. It's a flood-only level, so the enemy variety is a bit less interesting as a whole than Covenant levels were. It goes on for excessively overlong, and every aspect of it is just visually uninteresting. The whole level is just various shades of yucky, yellow, beige, brown, greenish, disgusting flood colours. Like, there's a little bit of that underlying High Charity purple and grey here and there poking through, but it's amongst the sea of flood that's just not great to look at, as well as being just a bit confusing because this area and this area and this area all look pretty dang similar, which leads to a lot of accidental backtracking your first time around, and a lot of double checking your bearings in subsequent playthroughs. And yet still, against all odds, the worst part manages to be the excessive amount of times that Cortana and or Gravemind feel the need to interrupt you in this level, to tell you how much they miss you and hate you respectively, which, considering Cortana has done nothing this game but cry about missing Chief and Gravemind has never really portrayed himself as a particularly likeable guy, I sort of feel like I find myself in a situation where I have to say that not one bit of information relayed by either of these goobers is of any real consequence. I guess other than Gravemind being mildly surprised that Cortana is still functioning, because there really isn't a whole lot of story going on in this level either, to be honest. Chief was looking for Cortana both because she has the Index and because he made a girl a promise he intends to keep, and Gravemind wants him very much not to do that. Chief makes his way through High Charity, some rooms of which are reminiscent of areas featured last time around, just more disgusting, and eventually makes it to a large chamber where Cortana is sequestered in a small side room. She still has the Index, Chief offers her a ride home, as the two are finally reunited for the first time since the last time they were on High Charity together, and the last time they spoke to Gravemind, who is now a lot less chatty and just sort of screeches at us instead. Possibly on account of realising that Chief and Cortana are going to pull their favourite trick once again, overloading the reactors of a ship to blow up the flood, Gravemind included, and save the day. With this achieved, they then make a hasty retreat from the self-destructing station, hoofing it on foot before being reunited with Arbiter, who is coming with a flamethrower to heroically rescue them, as the trio leave High Charity on a Pelican to go and activate the Halo ring. So yeah, not my favourite level by any means. It looks ugly, its layout is unfriendly, the Flood is simultaneously less interesting than the Covenant, and also present a lot more difficulty in certain areas. I never really stopped making the prevailing strategy a lot of the time to be just skipping areas of the level entirely and making a run for it. What little story the level really has to tell is portrayed in the most infuriating and unengaging way it could be, and actively interrupts the gameplay. It's definitely my least favourite level in Halo 3, and it really is a shame because the idea of going into the belly of the beast is perfectly serviceable. I just find it to be the only actively bothersome level of the lot, much like the library. Fortunately though, there is one more level to go, and the only repeat level name in the entire trilogy, as we once again go to a level simply titled Halo. just as the second level in Combat Evolved was. And honestly, while it's a shame that it just recycles a name, I think it's a perfect choice for the level that really caps off Chief's experience on Halo rings by harkening back to the beginning of this journey, if we forget about the Pillar of Autumn as a level at least. It also has the privilege of being our mandatory snow level, which is a theme that has been absent from Halo 3 thus far, as we've already gotten to visit classic level concepts such as jungles, deserts, beaches and towns, with plenty of requisite Forerunner and human architecture, and even getting an our mandatory Covenant ship level technically with Cortana. Anyway, the plot of this level is more or less what you expect it to be. Chief and Arbiter approach this Proto-Rings control room through an onslaught of flood, and I mostly stick with the flamethrower since you barely get to use it and it's a lot of fun. And when you get to the top, you have to hold them off for a while you wait for Sergeant Johnson and Guilty Spark to show up so that the latter may open up the door. Once inside, however, there is a complication. The ring is not yet complete, and won't be for a few days, which most certainly does not fit the schedule that the UNSC were hoping for. Activating the ring prematurely will result in the destruction of the ring and of the Ark, destroying it in its near entirety. And if there's anything we should know about our old friend Guilty Spark, it's that he can be a little bit possessive over his precious Halo ring. Possessive enough to previously sick the Sentinels on us once and try to kill Chief and Cortana to save his ring, and possessive enough still to fire a devastating blast at Johnson as he tries to insert Cortana into the control desk. This gets Chief's attention as he prepares to take action against Spark, who is particularly annoying as he keeps pushing him away from approaching at any given moment. Thankfully, Johnson is able to get a quick Spartan laser blast in to distract Spark, giving us enough time to take it from him and get some words of encouragement, taking it into our hands and blasting Guilty Spark away in a more actual boss battle than what we got out of the first game. It takes just a few shots to defeat the once more traitorous robot and watch him blow up to definitely for real this time, never ever to show up again in the Halo franchise. Or at least in the games, I suppose. Despite this resounding victory over finally being allowed to defeat Guilty Spark once and for all, Johnson is still gravely wounded after the attack, with him succumbing to his wounds after giving Chief one final order: don't let her go. We lost Miranda, we lost Johnson, and honestly even losing Guilty Spark is a little bit upsetting, and the journey is well and truly coming to an end now as Cortana activates the ring using the Index and sets things to blow, killing any and all remaining Flood that were in the area. But Chief, Arbiter and Cortana are still alive, and on the now rapidly self-destructing Halo ring, being chased by the Flood remnants and now, once again, by the Sentinels, as is tradition. Speaking of tradition, however, Johnson fortunately left us with more than just his Spartan laser to take down Guilty Spark. He left us his Warthog, giving us the gift of one final Warthog run to cap out the trilogy. Music blaring, pedal to the metal as Chief and Arbiter dodge, zip and drive through an entire Flood army on crumbling metal platforms above a sea of molten metal. Explosions going off left and right as you struggle to maintain control of the Warthog in what is easily the single largest driving segment that the game has thus far had, angling for that one perfect, satisfying run that sees you travel across the whole map at breakneck speeds in what is easily the perfect callback to Combat Evolved. It's just perfect. I mean, it's kind of annoying in situations where you fall off because of a lack of foresight, but even still, I love this set piece, and it's the perfect way, in my opinion, for Bungie's perfect Halo trilogy to end, in what is quite literally a blaze of glory as Chief flings the Warthog off of a ramp into Miranda's ship, the Forward Unto Dawn. The two of them narrowly avoid being crushed by the vehicles in the hangar as they begin their escape, with Arbiter manning the helm and Chief staying put with Cortana and nearly having his head taken off by a falling Scorpion. He clambers his way up to her, sitting down as the Halo ring self-destructs and finishes the fight once and for all, as Chief reassures her that, as he promised, they will make it. Enter once more the horrors of Xbox 360 Lord Hood's face, giving a solemn and meaningful eulogy over the many fallen heroes and the losses that humanity faced in their war against the Covenant and the Flood. From Reach to the Halo rings to Earth and the Ark, he salutes their courage, bravery and sacrifice, and speaks privately with the Arbiter to give him his thanks for being there. The front half of the ship made it through the slip space and arrived on Earth, but Chief was lost, presumed dead, and has joined his friends on the memorial for this war, mourned by the UNSC, but not by Arbiter. Arbiter believes killing Chief will take more than a portal mishap, instead opting to look to the future of his people, planning to return to his home world with Shipmaster and rebuild a life for the elites without the Covenant looming overhead. As Arbiter suspected, Chief, of course, is alive, adrift in space with Cortana light years from any civilization, with nothing to do, nowhere to go, and no one to see. Chief uploads Cortana onto the ship to look after him and, knowing that the fight is once and for all finished and with no rescue coming for potentially years, he goes back into cryosleep, ending the trilogy as it had begun, telling Cortana to wake him only if she needs him, as, on Legendary at least, we see the remnants of the back half of the ship drifting somewhat towards a mysterious planet, drifting towards Halo 4.
Now's one of those times. Pays to be the strong, silent type.
Thus endeth the tale of the Bungie Halo trilogy, the classic 3 games that started and subsequently finished it all. The iconic music, the iconic weapons, and the beloved characters all culminating in one of the most beloved and, dare I say, legendary video game trilogies of all time. A true sci-fi epic for the ages that has somehow never been faithfully adapted to film. But, as you likely know, Halo 3 is not where Master Chief's tale ends, nor is it where Bungie's tale ends. Nowadays, Bungie is equally known for its Destiny franchise and is even apparently bringing back their marathon games, which were, in many ways, the spiritual predecessor to what Halo eventually became. Or not, I don't really know at this point. But before any of that, and after Halo 3, Bungie did go on to make 2 more Halo games, with Halo Reach releasing 3 years after Halo 3, just as Halo 3 and Halo 2 had come 3 years after the titles before them. But in addition though, there was Halo 3 ODST, a sort of standalone expansion, but really more of a full game, that effectively just took the gameplay of Halo 3, took you out of the special Mjolnir armor, and set you down on the streets of New Mombasa in the eyes of a squad of ODSTs, Orbital Drop Shock Troopers. They were like Helldivers before it was cool, and that game is amazing. So amazing in fact that I do intend to make a full video on it, albeit likely much shorter video than any of the other Halos, as I can probably get away with skipping a lot of the gameplay stuff because it's just Halo 3 but like you're a bit more pathetic and weak. I just felt like not mentioning ODST even in passing was wrong for this video, as I don't want to be lampooned in any way by people who are upset that I only covered Halo 3. Fret not, ODST is indeed legendary and it will get its due diligence. I just don't want it to feel like a tacked on afterthought to Halo 3 because in a lot of ways I think the atmosphere and tone of that game kind of surpass what Halo 3 manages to be. Halo 3 is triumphant, it's simplistic and it's action packed. Chief and Arbiter are like that one meme from Predator, you know, the 2 bros just getting together to kick alien butt and look cool doing it. But ODST on the other hand is anything but. It's solemn, it has sad saxophone music playing all over the place and it takes its time to truly contemplate the horrors of war effectively and maturely, while still getting to have some of that ludicrous Halo ooh-rah dialogue in there to get the blood pumping. And that's all I really have to say on ODST for now. It's a great game, and I hope that I do it justice when I cover it in greater detail next time. Single player campaign, cooperative campaign, online multiplayer featuring a variety of game modes including Slayer, King of the Hill, Capture the Flag and many more. Theatre mode to allow you to watch gameplay back and record it from a variety of angles. Forge mode, letting you go in and customize levels in a way to create unique game modes and play experiences. With DLC in particular, and especially on the Master Chief Collection, this game has like genuinely a million different things to do, with near infinite replayability in so many modes that is only really surpassed by future Halo titles. There's so much stuff to do and so many different things to occupy you that it should come as no surprise that Halo 3 is still among the most active player bases in Halo to this day. People who didn't gel well with future installments still flock to Halo 3 in droves, and unlike the first 2 games, finding an online match via the MCC at peak hours is very quick, and while I'm still not very good at it, it is to me a whole lot better and a whole lot more memorable than Halo 2's multiplayer could ever hope to be for me personally. Granted, I'll be the first to admit that nostalgia goes a long way. Most people will fondly recall and gravitate towards their more formative memories of online games, and for me, I happened to play Halo 3 and Halo Reach when I was much younger than the age rating was, and didn't play the prior games until a later date. So, your mileage may vary, and for a newcomer you may prefer to give a go to a more contemporary game with modern design ideas like Halo Infinite. A good game online in its own right, but it just doesn't hit the same as Halo 3 once did back in the day. That feeling of getting home and messing around in the Forge on Sandbox to create wacky ideas, many of which spiritually live on in custom games to this day, flipping the elephants or just exploring the maps to find secrets was a wild time. Playing through the campaign after school with your brother looking for skulls and terminals and getting excited for the trailers of Halo Reach. Xbox 360 gaming was this special pocket of time that I, and many people my age, look back on fondly due to how iconic this game was. And with its competition alongside the rise of Call of Duty, it was a genuinely special period of gaming that connected people around the world almost as much as Halo 3's launch in general had done. The online gaming landscape of today is very different, and people don't talk as much as they used to, at least in Europe. And in many ways, and some of it may be for the better, it can make the feel of the community of a game like this feel very different nowadays than it once had. A lot of people who are still playing it, played it back in the day as well. I love Halo 3 in a lot of ways, hence why I've even made this video. And I hope you give the multiplayer a go via the Master Chief Collection, because there's just so much to love even 18 years later and counting. So this is a little unusual of me to add a little addendum to a chapter, but I neglected to mention somehow the armor customization features available in Halo 3, something that was then adapted later on into Halo Reach as well. And I actually think in a lot of ways this is very influential to modern gaming trends as well, because of the rise of things like microtransactions and the ability to customize your character in a variety of ways with skins and items. So there is some amount of influence that Halo 3 and other games of the time like Gears of War could have had on modern gaming trends as well. I think it's just an interesting parallel to make, and something I forgot to mention in this chapter about a great system of Halo 3 that honestly I don't know how I forgot about. But with all that said and done, I have exhausted more or less everything I really can as far as discussions of Halo 3 can possibly go. The game has a solid story with incredible music from He Who Shall Not Be Named, visuals that still mostly hold up whenever Lord Hood isn't on screen, and a plethora of online modes that still provide endless entertainment to young adults to this day. Even just based on the sales of this game alone, I would say Halo 3 is probably the most inarguably legendary game I have thus far stamped with such a title, because this game truly did rock the world when it released. It's special in a lot of ways to a lot of people, and it's a game I personally adore for just sort of being there at the right time to help me truly appreciate video games for their storytelling potential. That said though, I do think there is a case to be made for this game not quite sticking the landing in the story department. A lot of parts of it are just not as fleshed out as they maybe could have been when you really think about it, and compared to the delicate web weaved by Bungie for the Halo 2 campaign, I think there are some flaws that Halo 3 brings to the table. Skipping over Chief's escapades aboard the Forerunner ship is criminal, and we totally should have gotten to see them in some way. I also firmly believe that, while I appreciate getting to spend a fair bit more time on Earth than we did in Halo 2, I almost feel as though we didn't really get to spend enough time on the Ark as maybe we could have. It almost feels as though the game was split into these two distinct halves that arguably could have been big enough set pieces to get turned into full games in and of themselves. There's also the Miranda and Truth situation, where both characters are a lot less fleshed out than they were previously. Miranda's death is still of course something that I think was fumbled in a lot of ways, feeling more like a plot contrivance than it needed to, and Truth felt less like a conniving schemer and more just an angry old man shouting this time around. Character changes that coincide with new voice actors for the two of them. I harbour no ill will to the voice actors or even to the writers as far as these characters were concerned. I just definitely feel as though they weren't as strongly defined as they were in Halo 2, and Miranda in particular does feel like a lot of potential wasted in this game. But a lot of other stuff, especially as far as Johnson and Guilty Spark are concerned, is immensely satisfying. Getting to call back on so many awesome moments from the prior games in a way that still narratively ties it all together in a big explosive finale, it's just legendary. Especially when compared to the finale of the Mass Effect trilogy, I have a hard time arguing in any way that Halo didn't nail it. Despite a few minor flaws here and there along the way, the game ends in a way that is truly satisfying and neatly ties up more or less every major plot thread throughout the trilogy, with great send-offs to this cast of characters. Granted, this game is less ambitious in its sprawling story threads than Mass Effect. What Halo 3 achieves in its finale is nonetheless amazing, and really only leaves one more question: where does Bungie take Halo next?